702. WhatsApp Aubrey
on 072 702 1702.
16 minutes after 10 o'clock, Dr. Pedro Mzileni is Research Associate in the Faculty of Humanities at Nelson Mandela University, penned very recently, in fact today in the Sowetan, an opinion piece entitled "Fix the Mess in Black Education at Schools. Only loyalty to our schools will help achieve freedom and equality." Dr. Pedro Mzileni, thank you very much for joining us this evening. What a document that you've penned or released today. Had a look at it and I thought I need to speak to this man to get more of the ideas that he's penned. We have a problem in our education system, Dr. Mzileni?
Yes, good evening to you and also to your listeners. I think that the question that we have, the problem in education is obvious. We do have a deeper crisis that we need to address. I was listening and watching ministers celebrate the matric results last week. And I already knew that we have a problem here. So that's why I took the effort to actually pin down the actual problem that they are overlooking. So there are two things here.
Yeah.
When you talk about basic education, you are talking about a system that runs from preschool, grade 1 up to grade 12. And the quality of basic education is tested on two things. On the ability of the child to master numeracy and also literacy.
Yeah.
Those are the core foundations that will shape the mind and the mindset of the child up to their adulthood in terms of their competencies, convictions, and skills to be professionals that are going to be impactful and transformative in society. So by numeracy, what do I mean? I'm referring to the ability to reason and also to apply simple numerical concepts. In other words, the ability to comprehend addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division.
Yeah.
And usually that is covered through science and mathematics. And then on the literacy aspect, is the ability to read and write with meaning.
Yes.
And that is usually covered by the aspect of language.
Mm.
So when you talk about basic education, you are basically zooming in into the core competencies that children possess in science, mathematics, and African languages in our context.
Mm.
If we do not produce distinctions in those three disciplines in schools that are in townships and also in rural areas, then society is not moving forward at all. We are not doing what we're supposed to do as a post-1994 mandate, which was to make black education be the center of excellence. Because for me, where I'm seated, a good quality education system is the one where a child is able to go to any school in any rural area and they're able to come across a good physics teacher there and they produce top results from that school in the village. And then they go and acquire higher education in the institution of their choice for free. Mm. That is a system that would work excellently for every black child in the country. Mm. And if we're not talking about those things, then we're having a conversation that is irrelevant. So people must watch out and begin to dig deeper and ask the right questions as compared to celebrating provincial percentages, just like how ministers would like to mislead us to believe. We must not be part of that circus where they sit and self-celebrate themselves. We as black people in our communities, we must ask the right questions. And that is bound down to physical science, mathematics, and African languages, because that is the core of numeracy and literacy, which is the center of quality education for us as black communities.
So I can almost hear a minister or a spokesperson from the Department of Education say that we are dealing here with the legacy of apartheid. We are dealing with the reality of the fact that schools were deliberately under-resourced in the black areas that you speak of, that it was a systemic and a deliberate structural reality that was put in place, and that this government has had the thankless charge of trying to reverse those realities. But two, that the issue of a good quality education is precisely that which we have addressed through the CAPS curriculum, through the fact that our schools, particularly in the rural areas and townships, I think quintile 3 schools, or is it quintile 1 school? I can't remember how it works. But they are fee-free schools, so no child should be kept out of the system because of finance, and finance is a reality because of where we come from in the country, and that at the end of the day, conversations around the quality of education are only going to be meaningful in the way that you are suggesting if indeed we as the community put the shoulder to the wheel, as it were, by making sure that more of our children attend school, that we support the department, we support teachers and so forth, and that they have done what they can as a department, but the rest of the work is in fact that of the communities. How do you respond to that, Dr. Mzileni?
I don't agree with them when they say that, and let me tell you why. They say those things, but their actions and convictions are showing us the opposite. Let me tell you why. The very same apartheid system that they're referring to, it is under that very same apartheid system where township schools produced the top results under extreme conditions of oppression. And their mandate after 94 was to uplift those schools so that every black child gets to receive good quality education in science, mathematics, and also African languages. The reason why the generation of 1976 took bullets, it was so that a black child in Sowetan, in Mdantsane, in Zwelitsha, they can be taught science and mathematics by their own people in their own language of their choice. Now, if you look at what they do as ministers, they absolutely do not have confidence in black education at all. They take their own children to white schools and they offer a very illogical explanation of what transformation is in terms of education according to how we understand it. To them, quality education excellence is taking black children to white schools. Every morning, there will always be an MEC, Phanyazele Sufi, who is going to white schools to go down on his knees to beg for black children to be accepted in Afrikaans and English schools that are taught by white people. Nowhere does he talk about the progress that has been made to uplift the quality of teaching and learning in core subjects in black schools. So for black people, quality education, excellence and transformation has always been about producing top results in township schools to the extent that those schools defeat these white schools that are based in urban areas. That has always been the pride of our parents. So if you look at a township like Zwelitsha, whenever top results were produced in science and mathematics, the whole community used to have pride in that kind of an achievement. To the extent that that school used to be the best in the district here in the Eastern Cape. Today, we have Ulwazi High School that I spoke about, which is based in Mdantsane. That school has been producing 100% pass rates for the past 5 years in a row, and it has produced top results with a number of distinctions in these 3 disciplines that I'm talking about. This is a township school that is still embedded in the convictions of black excellent education. Do ministers care about Ulwazi High School in Mdantsane, and do they pump the necessary effort and resources to that school to continue being excellent and better than white schools? No, they don't. They continue lying to the nation that the best form of education is to take our people to white schools. We never fought for freedom in order to put our mercy and our destiny in the hands of white people. That has never been the concept of freedom. The concept of freedom for black people has always been to be critically conscious of our own conditions, to take ownership of our destiny, to self-determine where we want to go, both in education terms and also in economic terms. Because, you see, with education, how you structure your education system, it will determine the content of your revolution in future. So if you want to be a society that is truly liberated and owned by black people, we need to pay attention to who is teaching our children, what are they being taught, and what kind of skills do they leave grade 12 with. And we can only answer those questions when we begin to see distinctions in science, mathematics, and African languages in black township schools. Because once you master those three streams, you are able to branch out to any other discipline that you have passion to do. It will be very easy for you to comprehend history, sociology, economics, once you master mathematics, science, and African languages. So we must never play with the plight of black people when it comes to the question of education. We must ask the right questions. We must hold people accountable to do the right thing concerning our own communities. That is what I'm referring to when I talk about excellent education, not what these ministers are selling us.
We are told that more than 21% of our GDP is pumped into public education. And that the idea here is to create a curriculum that is universal, that is neither black nor white, but that is South African. And also that we need to understand that people are migrating in various ways. People are no longer just, or black people are no longer just living in so-called black areas. So to refer to schools as white schools and black schools is perhaps not informed by the material realities on the ground. How do you respond to that, Dr. Mzileni?
No, I think that statement has been proven to be incorrect for quite some time. When black kids are sent to white schools, even if the learners who are black are a majority, the power structure of the school remains white. They get told what kind of a hairstyle they must have. They get told what kind of a language they must have. They must speak, I mean. So if you look at these schools, and I call them white schools because their value system and the objectives of the education that they offer and the content of their curriculum still speaks to white convictions. No child who is black goes to those schools and they freely speak their language or even learn in their language or even express their own culture. Sometimes in these schools, they even get told that when they step inside the premises of the school, they must not speak their African languages. And we're talking about schools that are based in Africa, in South Africa. And we are told that you must not speak the language of the continent, your home language. You see, my brother, one thing that language does, I want to emphasize this point. Language has the power to depersonalize you, right? If you speak English on a daily basis to the extent that you even imbibe the language as a form of culture, because what culture and language does, they give you the tools to interpret your own reality. So if your reality is English, there's a high risk that the education that you're receiving from white people might end up depersonalizing you from your own self, from your own family, from your own community. That is why today we produce graduates who hate black communities because they've been trained and conditioned and conscientized to hate black people and love everything that has to do with white people. So when we talk about language, we seek also to decolonize the spirit. We decolonize the system of education so that as you get trained as an economist or as a scientist or as a professional, you do not forget the conditions that you're coming from and your mandate of being educated, which is to uplift your own community. The only time we will have an equal society that is truly free and democratic, it is only when black people are emancipated from the terrible conditions that they find themselves in. And education is one of those tools to emancipate our people. Therefore, we cannot ignore the content of the language that is being taught and even the science that are being taught. Those disciplines need to speak to our own conditions. Otherwise, what is their purpose? White people structure education to speak to their own conditions, their own economies, their own destinies.
In fact, as you speak now, Dr. Mzileni, that is why the Afrikaner white people fight so hard for their language to be the lingua franca of their schools and so forth, because they understand fundamentally what you've just spoken of now. The question I want to ask you, though, is Give me an example. Give me an example of a school that would espouse the values that you've just spoken of now within the borders of South Africa.
I made an example about the school in my immediate community, which is in Tanzania Ulwazi High School. The school has produced top results in isiXhosa, science, and mathematics. And the large majority of learners who come from that township school are going to enroll in the top 5 research universities in this country. That is the kind of an education system that we are going to fight for. A one that is going to give excellent education even to a child who comes from the most impoverished community. We are not interested in inspiring black children to go and be dehumanized in white schools, whereas we have our own institutions that we could develop ourselves and take them back to their glory days so that we learn to own our own communities and our own institutions and drive development according to our own terms. You see countries like China, Cuba, and Singapore, 20 years ago, they were having this conversation that we're having. But the difference between us and them is that they went and implemented what we're talking about. China is able to produce doctors, Cuba produces doctors, Singapore produces top scientists that we could find in the West. None of them speaks a single word of English. The whole world is bowing down to the excellence of their science. We talk about vaccinations today against COVID-19 because of the scientific expertise that comes from these 3 countries. So being a world leader, an innovator, and a powerful country when it comes to the economy, those things do not happen by magics. They come through a concerted effort of planning and structuring your education from the beginning to the end. And that is what we need now to do as activists. So everyone who is listening here, I call upon you to pay attention to the quality of black education and make your contribution in fighting for a quality public education system in our own communities for the sake of our own children.
The school that you referred to, did it have an independent curriculum to what schools in South Africa were studying, or was that a culture that arose out of that school, which arose out of a community free of the curriculum, the official CAPS curriculum of South Africa? So I hear the values that you are calling for us to espouse, particularly as African people. But would that mean a fundamental change in the CAPS curriculum? And has the school that you've just referred to been using a different curriculum?
Not at all. The school is using the very same curriculum that is used by everybody else. The difference with that school is that the principal and the teaching staff have a particular way of running that school on a daily basis. The grade 12 matriculants do not only begin preparing for matric when they arrive at grade 12. The preparation to grade 12 begins right below. By the time they get to grade 11, to grade 10, they are already familiar with how the system operates. In fact, the foundation that has been laid at lower levels has been structured in a manner that high levels of discipline and concerted effort are directed towards the 3 disciplines that I'm referring to.
Yeah.
Furthermore, the community is investing in that school. You see, with white schools, it's not that white schools are excellent or whatever. They have good infrastructure because the parents of those schools are paying money to the development of those schools. The owner of Pick and Pay in Summerstrand is investing money in the high schools in Summerstrand, right? So that is how a school is developed and operated according to high standards. Parents and the community must be involved on a daily basis in the running, the funding, and the advisory of that school. Teachers must be of high standard, be dedicated to their jobs, and provide quality education to learners. It is only when a teacher is good where you are going to learn easier and enjoy the subject, right? So the recruitment strategy by government when it comes to the personnel required to be in front of the learner in the classroom is what needs maximum effort to be invested on.
Yeah.
The reason why our results continue being so low in mathematics and science is because investments in the production of good quality teachers in those disciplines, especially in our rural schools, is not being done at an appropriate level. So the community as well needs to be involved, because in the past, it is the parents, the neighborhood that was involved in the building of black public education, and that is what we now need to produce this excellent system of education that I'm referring to for black people.
No, I was making the point earlier on. I laughed because I was making that exact point to say that the attitude of disengagement, of leaving things to them, whoever them might be, is a new thing. It is not an old thing, to the point where we've come to a place where we've accepted it as the character of black people. You know how we are. We won't, but that's not how we are. What you are referring to is something that we did in the very recent past. Some of these new developments we see now are very, very new, and we could talk about why we see that. But I want to ask you this question, Dr. Mzileni. You speak about the culture in that particular school that you refer to being one of parental involvement, of starting a child in a disciplined way from word go, not just focusing on matric. What about that is quintessentially black or African?
What is African about that is the traditions that we share about how we have always treated education as a people. The notion that Africans cannot handle systems, Africans cannot self-develop themselves, Africans cannot run institutions operationally with excellent standards. That phenomenon is quite new, and if as the intelligentsia of the black community were going to ignore and allow that discourse to continue as it is without being challenged, then we're going to find ourselves in trouble in future. Because if you look at our traditions and our histories, nowhere have we ever been a people that neglects its own children. Nowhere have we been a people that neglects its own communities and even our own economies. We have always taken an active part in building ourselves into becoming a people with dignity. The essence of why apartheid had to be fought and destroyed was because it was a system that was trying to de-skill us from the consciousness of managing our own affairs. So we fought against apartheid to prove that we are human beings and we are able to run our own affairs according to our own terms. So this post-1994 phenomenon now of disengagement, of all of a sudden taking everything that was built painfully by black people and saying, no, let white people educate us. Let white people build economies for us. Let them employ us. Literally, each and every single aspect of society, a white face has to supervise a black person. We never fought for such kind of a society. This society we fought for was the one that is going to be in total control according to our own terms as a people. So that is what I am referring to when I talk about the traditions of being African in how we've always run our education system. That tradition is shared by many other progressive countries that I have mentioned. China has crafted its own education system according to its own terms. Cuba has done the same. Zimbabwe has attempted to do the same. Singapore has done the same. Each and every leading economy in the world that was almost at absolute poverty just 2 decades ago, if you trace what they have done, they decided to treat development as their own project for their own people by themselves according to their own terms.
Make will
As
on
a generation of activists, we need to imbibe that value system and grow it practically in making it a possibility.
Absolutely. Make will. Hey, so you're listening to the doctor, ne? Are you listening to the doctor? 011-883-0702 021-446-0567. I am selling exactly what the doctor is selling. I am selling exactly what the doctor is selling. that we cannot disengage. We cannot hope that somebody else will do our job for us. We cannot stand back and say, no, we will react for now, and then think that the problem is over. We've got to engage. That's what I'm selling. The doctor has put it in far better words than I could. Make Will says, though, Dr. Pedro Mzileni, the good doctor is right about being taught in our own languages. The problem is we are not a homogeneous society. How are we going to achieve that, especially in urban townships? Dr. Mzileni?
Language equips one with the ability to read, write, and comprehend meaning. Language also gives you the tools to interpret your reality. So your language of learning could be English, it could be Xhosa, it could be French. It does not mean that the basic tenets of a discipline are going to fall off when you begin to translate what you've learned into a different language. So you can learn mathematics in English and go have a conversation about mathematics with another French intellectual. So what is important is at the foundation phase to establish the tenets of numeracy and literacy in a language that children are going to understand. That is why if you notice how the system is operated in the past, we always taught mathematics, language and science to children firstly in their home language. Then we gradually begin to introduce English once those basics are anchored in place. So for others, they begin to learn a different language when they're doing grade 3, grade 4, grade 5. But at the foundation level, it is always in their home language. Because you see, none of us, my brother, were born speaking an independent language. You see the language I'm speaking? English. I learned that language from other people. Even your own home language, when you were born, you were already born into a civilization that was already transmitting meaning according to its own language. All that you did was to be part of that social function and imbibe that language and interpret your reality according to that language. So language must be treated on those two terms. It is just a tool of communication, but most importantly, it is also a tool of learning that must be imbibed into a child at an early stage, because that is how you are going to grasp these concepts.
So how do you deal with the issue of the non-homogeneity of townships specifically? We've got Tswana, Xhosa, Ndebele, Tsonga-speaking people.
Oh, yeah, let me answer that quickly. Ne? The reason why I'm in the Eastern Cape and I was never taught Tsonga in high school, it is because of the Group Areas Act. It is because of the legacy of the Group Areas Act, right? Otherwise, if you go to other more united societies, if you look at places like Johannesburg, for an example, where when you grow up in a township, you imbibe at least 5 of our official languages.
Yeah.
That multilingual ability becomes easier in such communities. So the aspect of being multilingual is actually one of the core mandates of education that we need to implement as an African country. Our children need to be multilingual. And by being multilingual, I'm not referring to a person who speaks Xhosa and English. No. I'm referring to a person that is able to speak more than 6, 7, 8 languages from our own country and even across the continent.
Yeah.
Because if you look at an institution, you see a university like Venda. I like the University of Venda. I was listening to a vice chancellor this other day, the former vice chancellor, Professor Adam Habib from VET. He was standing on a podium saying that university is the most diverse university in the country because we have students from almost every continent in the world. And I disagreed with him. I said, actually, Prof, the most diverse university in South Africa is the University of Venda. Because in the University of Venda, you have a possession there of close to over 50 languages being spoken in that campus from the continent. Swahili, Venda, isiXhosa, isiNdebele, Shona, you name them, right? And products of the University of Venda are one of the leading intellectuals in law, in science, in mathematics, in research, in top corporate and public institutions in this country, if you notice some of them. Ronald Lamola is one of them. So those are one of the unique...
Ronald Lamola, the Minister of Justice.
Justice and Correctional Services.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
He's a product of that kind of an African education that was offered at the University of Venda.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. So those are the traditions that I'm referring to when I'm talking about excellence in our own institutions.
Yeah. Do you suppose perhaps that the department and those who influence it philosophically for the orientation, as you've described, an Afrocentric orientation in the way that we educate and imbibe knowledge, what is the problem? Is it a lack of capacity to understand some of these concepts? Is it a lack of... I mean, we're told 21% of South Africa's GDP is pumped into the basic education sector. So those resources are quite vast. They might not be enough, but they are quite vast. What is the reason, in your opinion, for the tardiness in understanding and implementing the philosophies, the pedagogical philosophies that you're talking about, Dr. Mzileni?
The basic education system needs to plan education differently. It needs to plan it according to our developmental and transformative needs. For example, they like to say that the biggest budget in the country in terms of the fiscus goes to education. But when you zoom into what does that fiscus do, you find that 70% of that amount goes to salaries, So you have district managers, deputy district manager, administrative manager, deputy administrative manager collecting huge amounts of salaries in that system. Those funds are not going to where they are intended to go, which is investing in quality teaching in science and mathematics and producing learners who are going to have the self-agency to be curious, creative, and driven to learn everything around them. All right? That is what we want to produce, a winning culture. And even the standards that are being set for our learners are quite disappointing. They clap hands that we have achieved a 76% pass rate, but if you look at the majority of those products, especially from townships and rural areas, none of them meet the requirements to at least be enrolled in a university. Only a few of those qualify to go to that level. So we are wasting resources the way things are being done at the moment.
But Dr. Mzileni, sorry to jump in, and then I want to take some calls. It appears to me that fundamentally the problem is not operational. Because if it was just operational, then sure, I think then we could talk about it's how they plan and how they implement. I'm suggesting, and perhaps you could comment on that it is a lack of a philosophical buy-in. In other words, the idea here is not that they don't know how to plan or don't know how to. The fact here is that what they are doing via the operations does not go along with what they say that they are trying to do in terms of the philosophies that underpin the system. I'm saying that there's a disjuncture, there's a disconnect between what they do, and I think that all that has happened here is that they've inherited a system and they've just continued with it. They've not overhauled it because they themselves don't have an ideology or philosophy that underpins the operations.
Correct, precisely. That's why I said at the beginning that the way excellence and transformation was defined as a framework, it's deeply illogical for the society we are trying to build. For them, an excellence in education is taking everyone to a white school. That's all they think about. Even their own children, they don't attend the schools that they preside over, right? children of ministers, MSs, they don't go to these black schools, right? They take them to white schools. So in their deepest convictions, they do not have any sense of understanding concerning what kind of a future are we supposed to build as far as black education is concerned. That does not concern their minds.
Dr. Pedro Mzileni, let me
begin to translate those things into operations. That is how now we are going to find this mess that I am referring to.
Let me go back to the callers and let's hear what they've got to say. Zonia is in Pretoria. Hi, Zonia.
Hello, Aubrey. Hi, how are you?
I'm well. I'm very well, Zonia. Go ahead.
Happy New Year. This doctor has really wowed me up.
Yeah.
Trust me, there is a disconnect from family connection to school connection. Because when you take your kids to white school, you disconnect them from who they are, and you expect them still to understand. That is garbage. Look, there is supposed to be a transformation system where you build these kids from where they are to where they have to go. And African educational system has got a means of relating to kids, which Western system does not know. Because Western system depends on analysis and African system depends on synthesis. As a result, they give examples at school of how things are when actually it does not relate to them. We remember in association.
Zonia, and maybe I'll put the same question to Dr. Mzileni.
Okay.
Is what you are saying to me something that exists already, or is this something that we aspire to? And if it exists, show me where. Because I can almost hear somebody saying, "No, these guys are talking nice things. It's nice, very nice, very nice." But which South African or African institution has shown the kinds of philosophical prowess that you are referring to, Zonia, and that has given us the kinds of results that we would like to see of a progressive, successful African country?
There's not enough of them. There are education systems where they bring you from your home, where you know your parents, and then they take you into your parents seem to be friendly with those people, and then it goes on. And now it must be gradual. Now, I know the doctor has given a lot of examples. One thing for sure is like Zimbabwe, Uganda, Ghana, Nigeria. They actually progressed through that. Even the French-speaking countries, that's why they have that strong accent. Actually, even not French, but still strong.
No, sure. I hear you. Zonia, so you're saying to me that the universities are there, even as the doctor has already said that. Let's take the University of Venda, for example, spoke of Zimbabwe, Makerere University out in Uganda, all the different universities that we know of on the continent. I'm looking for the translation of what we are talking about into practical, day-to-day experiential stuff. Or is that because our leaders are themselves victims of neo-colonialism, that they themselves begin to frustrate that trajectory, that progression, that ability to manifest an Afrocentric way of development? Zonia?
What happens is our leaders came through a different system, and that's what they knew. And you expect them to give you a different one? And elsewhere, some people came through a different system, but they have got a way of making it work for what is dear to them.
Zonia, let me stop you there, my brother. Zonia in Pretoria. Mandla is in Davidson. Hi, Mandla.
Hello, how are you doing?
I'm well. I'm very well, Mandla. Talk to me.
Yes, I want to argue on this fact that even Afrikaans is an African language. You also have to understand that. And also, schools, they are managed by our government, which is full of black people, to say that in bracket. And also the people in my township. I'm in a township. So the people here, the people, we have white and people, where white people will do our African languages, like Tswana, Zulu. So this thing of white this, white that is the fact that I do not understand the thing. And the concept of it, I didn't understand. If the doctor would explain to me what is white school and what is black school.
Mandla and Davidson, thanks very much for your call. Much appreciated. Pedro Mzileni, how do you respond?
No, I think I explained what white education is and what is a white school. And secondly, Afrikaans is not an African language. That language is Dutch. It is spoken in Germany and also in the border of Netherlands. What white people did when they moved here in the 18th century, they tried to indigenize that language and make it as if it's an African language. So there's no such a language called Afrikaans. That is a manufactured term. That language is Dutch. If you take that language and go speak it in Germany and the Netherlands, they will hear what you're saying because it's a language from that region. And then I agree with my previous brother who spoke about the Zimbabwean education system. It's one of the brightest examples that the continent has to offer. And if I had time, I would speak about what is happening in Zimbabwe at their basic education level and how different it is to what is happening in South Africa, and the excellent results that they produce in Zimbabwe. I'm sure many callers that are listening who have been classmates in university with students who originate from Zimbabwe, they will also testify at the amount of preparedness that they have been equipped with in their basic education level. So there are so many areas that need to be challenged and also be reconfigured in our own system, both from a philosophical and the conceptual level and also at an operational level. We need to pay attention to this education system more than ever before from now on, or else we won't have a future moving forward.
What is the reason for not seeing the developmental aspirations that an excellent education like that of Zimbabwe is supposed to bring? What is the reason why we have millions of Zimbabweans leaving their country, going to other places in the diaspora? Why is it that with such great education systems that on the continent, and indeed, as you say, even South Africa is suffering from that problem, where we've got these excellent, philosophically speaking, ideas about education, that we don't see the experiential translation of that excellence in the lives of the people of this country, of this continent?
Zimbabwe and South Africa share a similar history and traditions of excellence in African education. The liberation leaders of these countries, your Mugabe, your Nyerere, your Mandela, your Oliver Tambo, you name them, whenever they spoke on the question of education, you could see what they were referring to. The challenge in Zimbabwe was that post its liberation, there now became a moment where corporates and also government elites colluded in destroying such a proud legacy that country used to have.
But were they not all products of missionary education, Dr. Mzileni? I mean, all of the leaders that you've just referred to now were products of missionary education.
Yes, it was missionary education, but that missionary education was turned around to speak to African convictions. So the missionary education was not imbibed as it is. Africans contested that space and they translated it into something that could work for them. So if you look at institutions like Livedale and also the University of Sowetan, the intention behind those schools was to train an obedient class of black professionals who will serve the white apartheid system. But the very same institutions produced revolutionaries, you know.
Dr. Mzileni, I must stop that we've run out of time. It was a wonderful conversation. I'm sure we're going to have more conversations if you accept my invitations again. I really appreciate your time.
Sure, thank you.
Dr. Pedro Mzileni, Research Associate in the Faculty of Humanities at the University of Mandela University. 11:11.